Hello, welcome to another First Chapter Friday. I'm going to give you some more images from another book trailer that our film club made. It's actually the first trailer that we ever made, and it is the book The Summoning, and it's by Kelley Armstrong. It's part of a trilogy, which is by the name Darkest Powers. So it is a scary book. I hope you enjoy. It's quite the thriller. 12 years earlier, Mommy forgot to warn the new babysitter about the basement. Chloe teetered on the top step, chubby hands reaching up to clutch both railings, her arms shaking so much she could barely hang on. Her legs shook too, the Scooby-Doo heads on her slippers bobbing. Even her breath shook, puffing like she had been running. "Chloe?" Emily's muffled voice drifted up from the dark basement. "Your mom said the Coke's in the cold cellar, but I can't find it. Can you come down and help me?" Mommy said she told Emily about the basement. Chloe was sure of it. She closed her eyes and thought hard. Before Mommy and Daddy left for the party, she'd been playing in the TV room. Mommy had called, and Chloe had run into the front hall where Mommy had scooped her up in a hug, laughing when Chloe's doll poked her in the eye. "I see you're playing with Pirate Jasmine. Has she rescued poor Aladdin from the evil genie yet?" Chloe shook her head and then whispered, "Did you tell Emily about the basement?" "I most certainly did. No basements for Miss Chloe. That door stays closed." When Daddy came around the corner, Mommy said, "We really need to talk about moving, Steve." "Say the word and the sign goes up." Daddy ruffled Chloe's hair. "Be good for Emily, kiddo." And then they were gone. "Chloe, I know you can hear me," Emily yelled. Chloe peeled her fingers from the railing and stuck them in her ears. "Chloe, I can't go in the basement," Chloe called. I'm not allowed." "Well, I'm in charge, and I say you are. You're a big girl." Chloe made her feet move down one step. The back of her throat hurt, and everything looked fuzzy, like she was going to cry. "Chloe Saunders, you have 5 seconds, or I'll drag you down here and lock the door." Chloe raced down the steps so fast her feet tangled, and she tumbled into a heap on the landing. She lay there, ankle throbbing, tears burning her eyes as she peered into the basement with its creaks and smells and shadows, and Mrs. Hobb. There had been others before Mrs. Hobb scared them away, like old Mrs. Miller, who played peekaboo with Chloe and called her Mary, and Mr. Drake, who'd asked weird questions like whether anyone lived on the moon yet. And most times Chloe didn't even know the answer, but he'd still smile and tell her she was a good girl. She used to like coming downstairs and talking to the people. All she had to do was not look behind the furnace, where a man hung from the ceiling, his face all purple and puffy. He never said anything, but seeing him always made Chloe's tummy hurt. "Chloe," Emily's muffled voice called, "are you coming?" Mommy would say, "Think about the good parts, not the bad." So, as Chloe walked down the last 3 steps, she remembered Mrs. Miller and Mr. Drake, and she didn't think about Mrs. Hobbs at all, or not very much. At the bottom, she squinted into the near darkness. Just the night lights were on, the ones Mommy had put everywhere when Chloe started saying she didn't want to go downstairs, and Mommy thought she was afraid of the dark, which she was, a little, but only because the dark meant Mrs. Hobb could sneak up on her. Chloe could see the cold cellar door, though, so she kept her eyes on that and walked as fast as she could. When something moved, she forgot about not looking, but it was only the hanging man, and all she could see was his hand peeking from behind the furnace as he swayed. She ran to the cold cellar door and yanked it open. Inside it was pitch black. "Chloe?" Emily called from the darkness. Chloe clenched her fists. Now Emily was being really mean, hiding on her. Footsteps pattered overhead. "Mommy? Home already? Come on, Chloe. You aren't afraid of the dark, are you?" Emily laughed. "I guess you're still a little baby after all." Chloe scowled. Emily didn't know anything, just a stupid, mean girl. Chloe would get her a Coke and then run upstairs and tell Mommy, and Emily would never babysit her again. She leaned into the tiny room, trying to remember where Mommy kept the Coke. It was on the shelf, wasn't it? She darted over and stood on her tiptoes. Her fingers closed around a cool metal can. "Chloe! Chloe!" It was Emily's voice, but far away. It was shrill. Footsteps pounded across the floor overhead. "Chloe, where are you?" Chloe dropped the can. It hit the concrete with a crack, then rolled against her foot, hissing and spitting, soda pooling around her slippers. "Chloe, Chloe, where are you?" mimicked a voice behind her. It was like Emily's, but not quite. Chloe turned slowly. In the doorway stood an old woman in a pink housecoat. Her eyes and teeth glittered in the dark. "Mrs. Hobb." Chloe wanted to squeeze her eyes shut, but she didn't dare because it only made her madder. It made everything worse. Mrs. Hobb's skin rippled and squirmed. Then it went black and shiny, crackling like twigs in a campfire. Big chunks fell off, plopping onto the floor. Her hair sizzled and burned away. And then there was nothing left but a skull, dotted with scraps of blackened flesh. The jaws opened, the teeth still glittering. "Welcome back, Chloe." That was the very exciting prologue. Now we have chapter 1. I'll have to read it later. I'll be right back. Hi everyone, I'm back. After the prologue, of course, comes chapter 1. And it does, I want to caution you, have a little bit more mature topics in it. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 1. I bolted up in bed, one hand clutching my pendant, the other wrapped in my sheets. I struggled to recapture wisps of the dream already fluttering away. Something about a basement, a little girl. Me? I couldn't remember ever having a basement. We'd always lived in condo apartments. A little girl in a basement, something scary. Weren't basements always scary? I shivered, just thinking about them. Dark and damp and empty. But this one hadn't been empty. There'd been, I couldn't remember what. A man behind a furnace? A bang at my bedroom door made me jump. "Chloe!" Annette shrieked. "Why hasn't your alarm gone off? I'm the housekeeper, not your nanny. If you're late again, I am calling your father." As threats went, this wasn't exactly the stuff of nightmares. Even Annette managed to get hold of my dad in Berlin. He'd just pretend to listen, eyes on his BlackBerry, attention riveted to something more important, like the weather forecast. He'd murmur a vague, yes, I'll see to it when I get back, and then forget all about me the moment he hung up. I turned on my radio, cranked it up, and crawled out of bed. A half hour later, I was in my bathroom getting ready for school. I pulled the sides of my hair back in clips, glanced in the mirror, and shuddered. The style made me look 12 years old. I didn't need any help. I just turned 15 and servers still handed me kiddie menus in restaurants. I couldn't blame them. I was 5'0" with curves that only showed if I wore tight jeans and a tighter t-shirt. Aunt Lauren swore I'd shoot up and out when I finally got my period. By this point, I figured it was an if, not a when. Most of my friends had gotten theirs at 12, 11 even. I tried not to think about it too much, but of course I did. I worried that there was something wrong with me. Felt like a freak every time my friends talked about their periods. Prayed that they didn't find out I hadn't gotten mine. Aunt Lauren said I was fine, and she was a doctor, so I guess she'd know. But it still bugged me a lot. "Chloe!" The door shuddered under Annette's meaty fist. "I'm on the toilet," I shouted back. "Can't I get some privacy, maybe?" I tried just one clip at the back of my head, holding the sides up. Not bad. When I turned my head for a side view, the clip slid from my baby-fine hair. I never should have gotten it cut, but I'd been sick of having long, straight little girl hair. I decided on a shoulder-length wispy style. On the model, it looked great. On me, not so much. I eyed the unopened hair color tube. Carrie swore red streaks would be perfect in my strawberry blonde hair. I couldn't help thinking I'd look like a candy cane. Still, it might make me look older. "I'm picking up the phone, Chloe," Annette yelled. I grabbed the tube of dye, stuffed it in my backpack, and threw open the door. I took the stairs as always. The building might change, but my routine never did. The day I'd started kindergarten, my mother held my hand, my Sailor Moon backpack, over her other arm as we'd stood at the top of the landing. "Get ready, Chloe," she had said. 1, 2, 3, and then we would be off, racing down the stairs until we reached the bottom, panting and giggling, the floor swaying and sliding under our steady feet. All the fears over my first day of school gone. We'd run down the stairs together every morning all through kindergarten and half of first grade, and then there wasn't anyone to run down the stairs with anymore. I paused at the bottom, touching the necklace under my t-shirt, then shook off the memories, hoisted my backpack, and I walked from the stairwell. After my mom died, we'd moved around Buffalo a lot. My dad flipping luxury apartments, meaning he bought them in buildings in the final stages of construction, and then sold them when the work was complete. Since he was away on business most of the time, putting down roots wasn't important. Not for him, anyway. This morning, the stairs hadn't been such a bright idea. My stomach already was fluttering with nerves over my Spanish midterm. I'd screwed up the last test, gone to a weekend sleepover at Beth's when I should have been studying, and I barely passed. Spanish had never been my best subject, but if I didn't pull it up to a C, Dad might actually notice and start wondering whether an art school had been a smart choice. Milos was waiting for me in the cab at the curb. He had been driving me for 2 years now, through 2 moves and 3 schools. As I got in, he adjusted the visor on my side. The morning sun still hit my eyes, but I didn't tell him that. My stomach relaxed as I rubbed my fingers over the familiar rip in the armrest and inhaled chemical pine from the air freshener twisting above the vent.
"I saw a movie last night,"
he said as he slid the cab across 3 lanes.
"One of a kind you like."
"A thriller?"
"No.
He frowned, lips moving as if testing out word choices.
An action-adventure, you know. Lots of guns, things blowing up. A real shoot-'em-down movie."
I hated correcting Milo's English, but he insisted on it. "You mean a shoot-'em-up movie?" He cocked one dark brow.
"When you shoot a man, which way does he fall? Up?"
I laughed, and then we talked about movies for a while. My favorite subject. When Milos had to take a call from his dispatcher, I glanced out the side window. A long, dark-haired boy darted from behind a cluster of businessmen. He carried an old-fashioned plastic lunchbox with superhero on it. I was so busy trying to figure out which superhero it was, I didn't notice where the boy was headed until he leaped off the curb and landed between us and the next car. "Milos!" I screamed. "What?" The last word was ripped from my lungs as I slammed against my shoulder belt. The driver behind us and the one behind him laid on their horns, a chain reaction of protest.
What?
Milo said.
Chloe, what's wrong?
I looked over the hood of the car and saw nothing. Just an empty lane from front and the traffic veering to our left, drivers flashing Milos the finger as they passed. I clenched my fists as if that could somehow force the word out. "If you get in a jam, take another route," my speech therapist always said. I thought I saw someone. Speak slowly. Consider your words first. "I'm sorry. I thought I saw someone jump in front of us." Milos eased the taxi forward.
That happens to me sometimes, especially if I'm turning my head. I think I see someone, but there's no one there.
I nodded. My stomach hurt again. So I didn't have any images for you. I guess you'll have to make them up in your mind for this section. And if you want to find out more what happens, and I hope you do, it does get very intense because she does wind up going to a home for juvenile delinquents because of the things that she is seeing and hearing. And it does get to be quite the horror and juicy novel. So give it a go and have a great week. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.